It was found in an attic in 1972, a black and white photograph tucked inside an old wooden box beneath a stack of yellowed newspapers and war ration cards. It showed a funeral, a man in a dark suit standing beside a coffin, surrounded by mourners. Nothing unusual at first glance, until someone realized that the man in the coffin was the same man standing beside it. The photo was labeled 1895. The film stock didn't match any camera from that time period, and the photographer was never identified. They called it the Granger photograph, and from the moment it was found, people who looked at it began to disappear. It started with the man who discovered it, a retired postal worker named Harold Evans. He lived alone in a small house outside of Portland, Maine. He had no children, no visitors, and no reason to lie. Harold said he'd bought a trunk of old belongings at an estate auction. He collected antique photos. Faces frozen in time fascinated him. But this one was different. He told his neighbor that the longer he stared at it, the more it seemed to change. He said the man in the photo would shift, first turning his head, then lifting his eyes to meet Harold's. A week later, his neighbor found his front door open. The lights were still on. The kettle was still boiling. But Harold Evans was gone. The photograph was still there, lying face down on the kitchen table. The police investigation went nowhere. No fingerprints, no forced entry, no trail. Just the faint smell of chemicals in the air like old film developer. That's when the legend began. That the Granger photograph wasn't just a photo, but a window. A frozen moment that didn't end when the shutter closed. Historians tried to trace its origin. The style of dress in the image was late 19th century, but the photographic paper was decades newer. And the camera angle slightly above eye level, as if someone else had taken a photograph of the original. A copy of a copy. Something passed down each generation a little more distorted than the last. In 1984, it resurfaced again. A graduate student at Boston University named Claire Mason was researching early photography techniques. She found a reference to it buried in an old newspaper article about impossible photographs. She tracked the original down, stored in a private collection in Vermont. The collector refused to let her touch it, so she took a Polaroid of it instead. That was her first mistake. The next day, her classmates said she looked pale, distracted. She stopped coming to lectures. 2 weeks later, campus security broke into her dorm. After neighbors reported a smell, the Polaroid camera was on her desk, film still loaded. The last photo she took showed her dorm room empty, except for a faint figure standing in the corner, half seen, half developed. Her body was never found. After that, museums began refusing to display the image. Curators described lights flickering near the frame, or visitors claiming to see movement inside the photo. Like figures breathing, shifting, alive. Some swore that the man in the coffin wasn't the same every time you looked. Sometimes he was older, sometimes younger, sometimes his eyes were open. There's a rumor that the Granger photograph has existed far longer than any camera could explain. Copies of it appear in archives centuries apart. A version painted in 1630. Another sketched in 1791, a glass plate negative from 1895, and a digital scan from 2003. Each version identical, the same group of mourners, the same coffin, the same man watching himself die. For years, researchers tried to debunk it. They said it was coincidence, a hoax, a trick of lighting. Until 2007, when a photojournalist named Daniel Reed tracked down the Vermont collection, where the original was rumored to be stored. He was a skeptic. He wanted to prove it was fake. He filmed everything: his drive, his interviews, his inspection of the photograph itself. The footage was later recovered from his camera. It showed Daniel speaking calmly to the collector, then setting up his tripod. He aimed the lens at the photograph. He said, "Let's see what you really are." Then, halfway through the recording, he stopped talking. He froze completely. His camera stayed on, the frame fixed on the photograph for 12 minutes. In that time, the light in the room began to dim, slowly, like someone was turning a dial. When investigators reviewed the footage, they said something strange happened in the last few seconds. A reflection appeared on the glass. A human face behind Daniel smiling. But Daniel Reed was alone. They found his car parked outside, the keys still in the ignition. The photograph was gone. A month later, a new copy surfaced on an online forum. The username who posted it was Harold E. 1972, the same name as the first man who disappeared. The account was created the same day Daniel vanished, and the image posted was an exact scan of the Granger photograph. But this time, there were more people in it. One of them looked exactly like Daniel Reed. People who downloaded the image began reporting strange things. Their monitors flickered. Their webcams turned on by themselves. And some claimed they could see their own reflection inside the photograph's glass. When moderators deleted the post, it reappeared seconds later under a new name. Every attempt to erase it only seemed to make it multiply. It's been uploaded to dozens of websites, then taken down. Every version slightly different. The shadows deeper, the faces clearer, the coffin sometimes empty. And in the most recent copies, one of the mourners isn't looking at the coffin anymore. He's looking at the camera. Experts who've studied the image say it's impossible. The detail, the lighting, the perspective, none of it matches any photographic process from the 1800s. And yet, the clothing, the background, the architecture of the church where it was taken, all perfectly authentic. It's like a photograph taken through time. Some theorists believe it's a temporal echo, a moment that keeps replaying itself, each new copy pulling someone else into the scene. Others say it's something worse, that it isn't showing the past at all, but the future. In 2015, a paranormal researcher named David Klein claimed he found the original negative. He said it was in a private archive in England, locked inside a lead-lined box. He convinced the owner to let him see it. When he developed the image in his darkroom, he said the chemicals reacted violently, boiling, hissing, as if the photo was fighting to exist. He called his assistant, screaming that the faces were moving. Then the line went dead. The next morning, the lab was empty. Every photo, every negative, every canister of film, gone. Only one thing was left behind: a single fingerprint burned into the developer tray. It wasn't his. Since then, the Granger photograph has been missing again. But versions keep appearing in estate sales, online auctions, and abandoned houses. Always the same dimensions, always the same date on the back. 1895. Some people say if you stare long enough, you'll see your own reflection appear among the mourners. That the faces in the background slowly become familiar. A man in Argentina claimed to find his great-grandfather in it. A woman in Sweden said she saw herself, standing beside the coffin, wearing the same coat she was wearing when she looked at the photo. And one collector who owned dozens of historic portraits reported that every other photo in his house began to fade, except that one. He said the Granger photograph grew darker over time, as if absorbing light and with it, memory. He died 2 weeks later of heart failure. The photograph was never recovered. Some claim it's cursed. Others say it's a hoax. But no one can explain why every copy, no matter how it's digitized, always shows faint signs of movement. A subtle shift, a changing shadow, a face turning toward you just before the frame goes black. Image experts call it visual pareidolia. Your mind filling in what isn't there. But those who've seen the photo in person say it's more than imagination. They say the air changes when you're near it. A pressure like standing too close to a live wire. In 2021, a tech historian named Olivia Nguyen attempted to reconstruct the image with AI restoration tools. She wanted to enhance the photo's clarity, to finally see the faces clearly. When the process finished, her program returned a single file. No metadata, no timestamp. The restored version showed the same funeral, the same mourners. But now, there was someone else. A woman in the background holding a camera. Olivia froze. The frame zoomed in and saw her own face, staring back. Her computer shut down. The file corrupted. And she hasn't spoken publicly since. Maybe it's not the photo that's haunted. Maybe it's the act of looking itself. The idea that some images were never meant to be seen because they weren't captured from our side of reality. Maybe cameras don't just take pictures. Maybe they open doors. And once opened, some doors don't close. So if you ever come across a black and white photo of a funeral dated 1895 with a man standing beside his own coffin, don't look too long. Don't try to copy it. Don't even keep it, because every person who's ever looked for it has joined it. And somewhere in the dark room between worlds, the camera is still developing. This was the photograph that shouldn't exist.